Hello, class. We're getting into Module 4, the T-test and Mann-Whitney test. This is really the very first test that students learn to use when they learn to do inferential statistics, basically. So here we go. There are 3 sections in this module. We're going to use the SPSS to run the T-test and the Mann-Whitney test. We're going to become more familiar with the terminology and procedures for running and reporting T-test and the Mann-Whitney. And then we're going to talk a little bit about our course project. Let's first start talking about the T-test, the Mann-Whitney. What do we use it for? Well, it's to compare 2 groups of continuous variables. And you can see the 2 on the screen there that are represented by the histograms and the graphs. The t-test, as I said, compares 2 groups of continuous variables. And that's important that we're talking about continuous data. That would be something like 2 teachers were competing or with different programs in their classrooms and giving a test, a final exam at the end of the year to compare the groups, to compare the models. This t-test could be used to compare those student scores in that situation. Before you can run a t-test, there's some tests that you have to do to the data. You have to check the data to find out if it can be used in a t-test. You're going to check it for normality, an end quota, and homogeneity of variance. I think you probably have an idea of what those are, but we're going to talk about those a little bit. Normality is checked on your histogram, and you've been doing that, and should show a normal distribution, and it should look like this. So if you check your data, put it in SPSS, and then run the histogram with normal curve, you should get something like that with a large percentage of your bars below the normal curve. Now, also, you're going to usually have to divide your data into 2 groups. So you know how to do that. We learned how to do that in Module 3. So you're going to be able to sort a control group and a group, in this case, pet therapy. I think we may have done a problem with pet therapy. I can't remember. Anyway, after you do it and you find out that they are normal, then you do this t-test. But then there are a couple of other things you need to check, but you really can't check those until the t-test has been run. And you look down here and you find the N quota, the N values, and they need to be 30 or more. That's really not a hard and fast rule, but they need to be, we'll just say for now, they need to be 30 or more. If they're not, you're going to have to go back and do something else. What that something else is, we'll see in a minute. Then you have to check for homogeneity of variance. That's a fancy way of saying, are the standard deviations of both groups pretty much the same? Because the standard deviation, when you square it, is the variance, and homogeneity means they're the same. So really what you're going to look at, Levine's test statistic for homogeneity of variance. And if you see that the significance value, if you look at the significance value and it's greater than 0.05, that meant that your null hypothesis was not violated. In other words, there was no statistically significant difference between the variances. So in this case, you're going to want this number right here in red to be greater than 0.05 when you're checking that part of it. Now, what if none of that works? What if you don't have normality? What if you don't have 30 in a group? Or what if you don't have homogeneity of variance? Well, one of the things you do is you look at using a Mann-Whitney test. And the Mann-Whitney U-test is an alternative to t-test, runs the same way and gives basically the same results. And you don't have to know this, like you don't have to know what's in your car engine making it run. You just have to know that it gets you there. You just have to know that this test works. So here's what can happen. Here's a normal curve. Now here's some data that's not normal. It's skewed. That means it's all on one side. Bimodal has actually two lumps or two humps or two normal curves within it. Bimodal. And then or it's flat. All your data comes across the top. So that's when you'd use the Mann-Whitney test because it's not normal. Now let's look at what you're going to do in the assignment today, or the modules. You've got, I think there are about 5 videos to look at, but the first 3 I've grouped together because they fit on the screen well, but you're going to run the actual, and I say runs the actual t-test, because when you come down here and use Sage Publications program, they start out with the t-test runs as an ANOVA. And I think, well, that's not a real good way to teach this. I want you to do this first. I want you to actually run the t-test, an actual t-test. And this is a video that Dr. Bounds made, and it does very well for what we need. So you'll look at that first. Takes a few minutes here. I don't know how long that one is. Usually, 5 minutes. Then you're going to look at this next test, runs test as an ANOVA. An ANOVA is a glorified way of running t-test. Here's what an ANOVA will do. It's an analysis of the variances, and it will run a group of t-tests at one time. Let's say it'll run 2, 3, and 4. When you've got to do something like that, it'll run all of them at one time. But we're going to start out pretty simply here, and we're going to go back and run this actual t-test. Then you're going to do one of your homework problems doing the ANOVA as a t-test, and then you're going to do one of your homework problems using the Mann-Whitney, and so that's why we have 3 of those videos. Then you're going to do a thing called effect size. You know, I think you had that as a question in lesson 2, module 2 maybe. But effect size tells you if the magnitude of the difference in your 2 groups in the scores was of what effect was that? Was it weak? Was it moderate? Or was it strong? That's usually what we do. We try to find out what the magnitude of the effect is. So you have 2 things you're looking for when you do a t-test. The first thing is you're looking for significant difference. But now significant difference in 2 scores, say one group scored 85 and the other one scores 87, is that difference between 80, if it's significant, and it could be depending on how your standard deviations and things work out and your variance, but if it's significant, then that's one thing. But was it moderately different? Was it weakly different? You know, you've got to look and find that out. So that's one of the things you're going to do. You're going to look at this video right here, 2 minutes, and it'll tell you all about that. And usually when you do t-test, you use something called Cohen's D. I know that name Cohen's not too popular now with the president, but anyway, Cohen's D is the test that you're going to use to compare the magnitude of the t-test if it is significant. And you can do that a couple of ways. You can go to this website, which will be in your lesson display. You can find that and go there and put in the results of the t-test, and it'll tell you to what degree the effect was for that. I think that's pretty neat. Here's your assignment for chapter 4. Up here at the top, you see calculating Cohen's D for independent samples t-test. That's a spreadsheet in Excel to calculate that. Here are the basic components of a chapter 4. Now, this is for part of this assignment on your part 3, the course project down here. You're going to do a look at this because it will give you what you're going to do. You're going to actually turn part of this in. This is going to be a sheet that you fill out and turn in. And then part 2, another sheet that you're going to fill out is part 2 of the module. So here's what you need for your exercises and homework. Here's what we're going to do first. Part 1, modified homework instructions. Well, they're modified because in the book they think you're going to do all t-tests. You know, they ask you to do 3 problems and they thought you were going to do 3 t-tests. Well, we're not going to do it that way. We're going to do 4.2a, 4.4b, and 4.8a. And we're going to do 4.2a. We're going to actually run the t-test, not an ANOVA. You're going to do the t-test. 4.4b, you're going to run a Mann-Whitney. Even though the pretest may calculate otherwise or indicate otherwise, I want you to run the Mann-Whitney test. And then 4.8a, you're going to run the one-way ANOVA. You're going to use the ANOVA to do the t-test. Then you're going to calculate the effect size for each one of these because you're going to get the numbers you need to do that. And then you're going to calculate the effect size. Then you're going to write an abstract of 200 words or less for each one of those. Let's go back to that. Let me go back and look at that. Here are the things you can use. You're going to use this to help you do the effect size, calculate it. This first one up here, the second 2 up here, you're going to use and turn those in as part of your assignment. And here you see the information for part 1, telling you that again. Here's part 2. You're going to complete the exercise, and I need to get that spelled correctly. Your understanding of the terminologies and procedure, you're going to attach that as a Word file. It's going to ask you 9 questions, and you're going to answer those 9 questions. Course project, you're going to provide an outline of the major headings with an explanation of the content normally contained in a Chapter 4 of a PhD or an ED education quantitative dissertation. Here's what your assignment is. After you look at some Chapter 4s, and I think I've given you some examples in this assignment, and a few others that you can Google online. You can Google the results for this, the topic, and determine and provide what you think should be included under each of the major headings. And I'm giving you a sheet with the 5 major headings of what is normally in a Chapter 4 part of a dissertation, a quantitative dissertation. So you'll do that. You could go online and review some A-State dissertations to help you with that part of the project. You can look at the example 4 that I gave you, I think, last time, and it would have these pieces in it. Then you'll submit your assignments on Word documents. And really, I would like for you to submit 3 different documents, one with part 1, part 2, and part 3. So, I say to you, good luck in this assignment. And if you have any questions, call me, email me, and let me know.